Chapter 1 of Wylder's Hand. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Wylder's Hand by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. Chapter 1. Relating how I drove through the village of Gillingden with Mark Wylder's letter in my valise. It was late in the autumn, and I was skimming along through a rich English country in a post-chaise among tall hedgerows gilded, like all the landscape, with the slanting beams of sunset. The road makes a long and easy descent into the little town of Gillingden, and down this we were going at an exhilarating pace, and the jingle of the vehicle sounded like sledge bells in my ears, and its swaying and jerking were pleasant and lifelike. I fancy I was in one of those moods which, under similar circumstances, I sometimes experience still, a semi-narcotic excitement, silent but delightful. An undulating landscape with a homely farmstead here and there, and plenty of old English timber scattered grandly over it, extended mistily to my right. On the left, the road is overtopped by masses of noble forest. The old park of Brenden lies there, more than 4 miles from end to end. These masses of solemn and discolored verdure, the faint but splendid lights, and long filmy shadows, the slopes and hollows. My eyes wandered over them all, with that strange sense of unreality, and that mingling of sweet and bitter fancy, with which we revisit a scene familiar in very remote and early childhood, and which has haunted a long interval of maturity and absence, like a romantic reverie. As I looked through the chaise windows, every moment presented some group or outline or homely object, for years forgotten, and now with a strange surprise how vividly remembered and how affectionately greeted. We drove by the small old house at the left, with its double gable and pretty grass garden, and trim yews and modern lilacs and laburnums, backed by the grand timber of the park. It was the parsonage, and old bachelor Dr. Crewe, the rector in my nonage, still stood in memory at the door, in his black shorts and gaiters, with his hands in his pockets, and a puckered smile on his hard, ruddy countenance, as I approached. He smiled little on others, I believe, but always kindly upon me. This general liking for children and instinct of smiling on them is one source of the delightful illusions which make the remembrance of early days so like a dream of paradise, and give us, at starting, such false notions of our value. There was a little fair-haired child playing on the ground before the steps as I whirled by. The old rector had long passed away, the shorts, gaiters, and smile, a phantom, and nature, who had gathered in the past, was providing for the future. The pretty mill road running up through Redmond's Dell, dank and dark, with tall romantic trees, was left behind in another moment, and we were now traversing the homely and antique street of the little town, with its queer shops and solid steep-roofed residences. Up Church Street, I contrived to peep at the old grey tower where the chimes hung, and as we turned the corner, a glance at the Brenden Arms. How very small and low that palatial hostelry of my earlier recollections had grown. There were new faces at the door. It was only 22 years ago, and I was then but 11 years old. A retrospect of a score of years or so, at 33, is a much vaster affair than a much longer one at 50. The whole thing seemed like yesterday, and as I write, I open my eyes, and start and cry. Can it be 25 and 20? Aye, by Jove, 35 years since then? How my days have flown! And I think, when another such yesterday shall have arrived, where shall I be? The first 10 years of my life were longer than all the rest put together, and I think would continue to be so were my future extended to an ante-Noachian span. It is the first 10 that emerge from nothing, and commencing in a point, it is during them that consciousness, memory, all the faculties grow, and the experience of sense is so novel, crowded, and astounding. It is this beginning at a point, and expanding to the immense disk of our present range of sensuous experience, that gives to them so prodigious and illusory perspective, and makes us, in childhood, measuring futurity by them, form so wild and exaggerated an estimate of the duration of human life. But I beg your pardon. My journey was from London. When I had reached my lodgings, after my little excursion up the Rhine, upon my table there lay, among the rest, one letter. There generally is an overdue bundle, which I viewed with suspicion. I could not in the least tell why. It was a broad-faced letter, of bluish complexion, and had made inquisition after me in the country, had asked for me at Queen's Folkestone, and advised by my cousin, had presented itself at the Friars in Shropshire, and thence proceeded by Sir Harry's direction, there was the autograph, to Norton Hall. Thence again
Sample complete. Ready to continue?